I finally interjected my own opinion, shrugging my shoulders. A few more murmurs, slowly growing louder in volume as friends and desk mates began talking to each other to alleviate the boredom. 5 minutes later, whatever the weather is doing to our phones clearly has done something else. Our electric went out. We could still connect to the Wi-Fi. Obviously, I'm writing this, aren't I? But nothing else. Lights burn out, the projector wouldn't turn on, even the hum of the air conditioner that we hardly notice anymore just went silent. It was around 2 o'clock we heard the first scream. It was horrible and blood-curdling, and it came from outside. We could hear it reverberate from the glass window, cold to the touch. As I'd find out later, the first of many screams to come. Some kid had decided to go outside. We didn't know that yet, though. Mr. Sampson had clearly had enough. I'm going to check with Ms. Young next door. Stay put. Lock the door behind me. I'll be back shortly. Standing from his desk, he took brisk steps to the classroom door, exiting with the confidence only an authority figure has. We followed his instructions. For a while, at least. Minutes ticked by. Finally, around 2:30, we decided to just leave. What were they going to do? We'd been left with no guidance. Just a bunch of kids who totally didn't know better, right? It was cold outside as I passed the threshold. You know when you enter a Walmart at midnight and everything is just weird? Like you're on a different plane? That's kind of what this felt like. The halls were dark. Silent. The only light strewn in through the double doors in Hall B, casting large shadows behind doorways. The fog pressed against the door, almost ominously. I'm leaving. The guy from earlier shrugged, headed towards the doorway. What if they turn the alarms on? The doors will sound. Especially if we're all locked down. Ashley pointed out. Power's out. I doubt they are. He called from behind him. I only looked over at him when I heard the doors open. Immediately, he began screaming. He jerked away from the door as if he'd been burned. The air smelled like chlorine and bleach. Maybe a bit of formaldehyde that the zoology class uses during exams. The doors swung shut the second he'd let go, the fog quickly dissipating. Audrey rushed over to him, trying to help. What's the matter? Josh? She set a hand on his shoulder before jerking her own hand back, letting out a sharp exhale as if she'd been burned. Because she had. She seemed to notice the situation almost instantly, shrinking back from the cowering boy in front of her, now letting out raspy and crackling moans of pain. It reminded me of someone with pneumonia, the sound of it. Burning. His skin was burning. Bright red and blistering, and so was the palm of Audrey's hand. It's a chemical burn. What touched them? There's a shower in the science lab. We should get them there. How did this happen? 30 voices, all at once. We split up, in the end. 5 of them headed to 2B, the lab with the supposed shower. The rest of us headed into the classroom, half of us eerily quiet, the other chattering in confusion and alarm. And here we are, folks. A couple hours later, in a classroom surrounded by white. A fog of chemicals. We should find someone who knows what's going on. We can't just sit here, can we? And yet, that's exactly what we're doing. I'm posting this. You guys seem to know your way out of some less than ideal situations. I'm at a loss. I'm scared. I'm a hitman, but I'm not allowed to kill my next target. Michael Zinski wasn't my usual type of client. He wasn't a spurned lover looking for revenge, or a murderer looking to snuff out the witnesses to his crime, or a husband hungry for his wife's insurance policy. He was just an ordinary guy looking out for his sister. I wouldn't normally resort to such drastic measures, but Harold has become so awful. Treats her like garbage. Doesn't give a rat's ass about her or anything except for that stupid band he sings in with his work buddies. He blew his nose loudly. You understand that, right, Switchblade? I winced. That's just my alias, Michael. You shouldn't, actually call me that in casual conversation. Then what should I call you? I blinked. Clearly, he had never done anything like this before. Do you have the cash? His eyes darted around the diner. Then, from his pocket, he pulled out a wad of $100 bills. You can't just, they'll see it. I hastily threw him one of the napkins. Wrap it up in that. And do it discreetly. He wasn't discreet, but, thankfully, the diner was nearly empty at this hour. It's twice your usual rate, he whispered, very loudly. I wanted to give you a big tip, so you'll do a good job. A tip? You're not ordering an ice cream cone, Michael. You're ordering a hit. But I took the cash, smiled, and buried it deep in my pocket. And I don't want you to kill him. What? Michael, you know I'm a hitman, right? Yes. But Nancy needs his income. She's been a housewife for the past 20 years. No work experience, no education past high school. There's no way she could support herself on her own. You could support her with the cash you just gave me. He shook his head. I've tried. She won't let me. Cares too much. I sighed. Well, okay. Suppose I did take you up on this job. What do you even want me to do to him, if not kill him? I don't know. Scare him. Threaten him. Just make him stop being so terrible to her. But it's risky business. I mean, he'll know what I look like, and you'll go on Sunday morning. He'll be napping alone in the house and won't even see you come in. Michael looked down at the table and then added, it's the only time he's ever alone in the house. The only time he lets her leave. My belligerence evaporated, and I felt a pang of sympathy. It's that bad? He nodded. Okay. I'm in. The house was a tiny little thing, shoved into the gap between a massive brownstone and a dilapidated food mart. It would be a challenge to do it without any witnesses. Good. I like a challenge. I snuck through the backyard, creatively using the various bushes and fencing to hide from onlookers. I then stepped into the open window, like Michael told me to. The knife was heavy in my hands. I turned left at the kitchen and crept into the living room. In the center stood a microphone, a music stand, and some sheet music, presumably for Harold and his band. Nancy's needlepoint supplies were pushed into the corner, taking up as little space as they possibly could. I walked into the next room. And there, in the armchair, sat Harold. Fast asleep. I retrieved the chloroform from my pocket. With the grace of a dancer, I lay it against his nose. And then I set to work. I visited Nancy myself a few weeks later. I like to do that sometimes. Pose as a friendly neighbor, see how their lives have changed in the wake of my work. Yes, I know it increases my chances of getting caught. But, as I said, I like a challenge. When she flung open the door, her eyes were bright, and she wore a smile. Hi. I'm Smith Baker, I said. Just moved here, a few houses away from you, behind the food mart. Oh, how nice. Please come in. She led me into the living room, and I smiled. The music stand and other equipment were thrown haphazardly in the corner. Nancy's needlepoint was sprawled across the sofa, taking up as much space as it possibly could. Smith, this is my husband, Harold. He just stared at me. Still, silent, pale. And then he started shaking wildly, clawing at the raw, red mark across his throat. Oh, sorry, I should explain. She sat down, with a small smile. He's not trying to be rude. It's just that, well, he had an accident, a few weeks ago. And now he can't speak, I'm afraid." She patted his arm, comfortingly, as he clung to her. "Or sing, unfortunately. An accident. That, mysteriously, cut his vocal cords and left the rest of him untouched." I could see Harold's hand shaking, his lip trembling. I wonder if he was thinking about the first thing I said to him when the chloroform wore off. "If you don't treat Nancy right, I'll slit your throat again. And next time, you'll lose more than just your voice." I smiled at Harold. "Would you like a cookie?" I asked, holding out the tray. "I baked them myself." If you see them smile at you, make sure to smile back. Look, I don't want to post this just for it to be called a piece of fiction, but if it does, I guess I can't do anything about it. Some of you might not believe this, some of you might say this is fake. Truth is, I don't care anymore. All I want is to get this out as a warning. Currently, I'm staying in a motel and it's like 2 a.m. There's some signal here. The incident I experienced earlier caused me to not get any sleep, hence the reason as to why I'm posting this here. I guess I'll just start then. Yesterday was my mom's birthday. She and my dad lives in the rural part of a different state, which means miles and miles of driving for me. I decided to bring my cat, MIP. It was around an 8-hour drive. I also can't wait to test out my new car camera that I just got the other day. I bought it for a pretty cheap price, primarily because I'm low on money. Our trip towards there was rather uneventful. I just listened to some music while MIP does his everyday 16-hour nap. We arrived at my parents' house at around 11:40 a.m., just in time for lunch. My parents' house was an old, standard American-style house that dates back to the mid-1900s. I remember them saying they got it from my grandparents. The house was very ornate, and I kind of like it. It had a wide garden to the front and a garage for a single car. The house had a second floor and attic, while the roof was blue. Meanwhile, the walls were painted with a type of white. My dad was also there, as he was just recently retired from his job. Time goes by fast, doesn't it? After lunch, I stayed to watch a movie together with my parents. They had a movie projector attached on their ceiling, and they even had a projector screen. The movie was, it's mediocre, I guess. My parents picked it, so you can expect what it's like. But my parents enjoyed it, and that alone made me happy. My mother was very grateful. Her birthday might not seem much, but seeing her son after a year for her 56th birthday with the whole family together, now that is something that makes her happy. And trust me, not a lot of things make her happy. After the movie, we ate some cake, talked about our life, and I said farewell to my parents. It was time to take the 8-hour drive back home. I left at around 4:30 p.m. My parents tried to convince me to stay, but I told them that my girlfriend was waiting at my apartment and that she might get mad at me for leaving her or something, you know, normal problems. And so, I started up my car, turned on the music, and drove out of there. Along the way, we crossed towns, major cities, lots of forest, and a few rivers. From what I can remember, at around 10 p.m., we were driving through this rarely used road. At this point, the only light source came from the inside of my car and the headlights itself. My car started running low on gas. We were far from any gas stations, so I parked to the side of the dirt road, halfway through some woodlands. "We're just going to get a quick refill, okay?" I said to MIP. It was quickly responded by an annoying meow. He doesn't like being bothered in his sleep. Luckily, I remembered to bring some gas, as suggested by my girlfriend. So I got out the car, bringing a gas canister with me, and started pumping gas into the fuel tank. After emptying the canister, I had a look at the place. I mean, MIP wouldn't mind, he's busy sleeping. I grabbed the flashlight from my bag and brought it with me to have a look outside. Maybe get some fresh air or something. I could describe the place as being relaxing in a way. We were in an area where the roads weren't pavement. It stretched on for about a couple miles, with only woodlands on either side of the road and occasional rivers. It was a great place for any outsider like me. I know some of you might say that this is a bad idea, especially in the dark, but I've been driving for 6 hours non-stop at this point, and I would love to have a break. The place was also very windy. I used to play in the woods with my friends when I was a child, so I almost didn't get bothered when I heard a distorted shriek coming from in front of us. It sounded like it was coming from the road ahead, but quite a distance away. It wasn't that loud, so I presume it was around a mile away or something. I shrugged it off as some kind of wild animal or owl that I haven't seen before. Besides, we were still in a very rural area. After that, I got back in the car and prepared to continue the journey. As I was putting back the flashlight in my bag though, I saw MIP standing up in my passenger seat. I thought he was finally done with his nap, so I looked at him. But he seems paranoid, his green eyes dilated, his hair was stood up, and he was looking around, primarily at the direction of the shriek. "What's wrong, buddy?" I asked. He didn't respond. He normally always meows back. Instead, he just keeps staring into the distance, like he was scared of something. And then I heard the sound again. This time, quieter. But that was the breaking point for MIP. He jumped to the back of my car and hid under my seat. I bent down and tried to calm him down. "Whoa, don't worry, MIP. It's just an animal. I'm sure of it." I reassured him. He still doesn't meow. I let out a sigh and opened the windows to let some fresh air in. I also turned off the radio, as there was only static. This area didn't have any signal. I mean, MIP will come out eventually, right? I thought to myself. I looked at the time. It was 10:17 p.m. It was getting very late. My eyes started feeling heavy. I started yawning more often. I can't delay any more time. Theoretically though, I should arrive at my apartment by 1 a.m. if I just drove without any stops, and so that's what I planned to do. As I was cruising down the road, I noticed a bright yellow sign up ahead. While rubbing my eyes, I slowed down and tried to read it. From what I can remember, this is what it said. "Warning, if you see them smile at you, please smile back. Otherwise, injury, dismemberment, or death may occur. You have been warned." Part of the sign was smothered over with a crimson reddish substance. Instead, at the bottom of the sign, the phrase "turn back" was written messily, like if the person writing it was in a hurry. To the left of it, I also saw a poor attempt at drawing a face. The sign itself was questionable. The sign was made of metal, with a bright, yellow color on the front. The metal pole holding it up was very rusty, and as I checked, so was the back of the sign. Vines had grown all over the sign, but it was still readable. The overall feel of it was making my spine shiver. So much so that I closed the windows. I stayed there for a minute, not knowing what to do. Who's them?" I muttered to myself. I took a sip from my water bottle and decided to continue through the road. And holy shit, what I saw next was sickening and horrifying. I wished I would have just turned back. As I was driving through there, I thought I caught a glimpse of something. Something on the trees. Because I was curious, I wanted to have a look at it. I already passed it though, and it was almost pitch black outside, so I got out with my flashlight to have a look. And as I pointed the light to where I saw it, I stumbled back and almost threw up. Nailed to some of the trees were human faces. I saw at least 5 of them there. Some were old and rotting, but some looked like they were new. They all had a number scratched messily at the bark under them. They were 22, 23, 24, 25, and 26. And on the side of the road near the faces was a headless woman lying on the floor. It looked like it was there for days now. Flies and maggots were swarming it. I immediately turned my head around and got back in the car. I tried my best not to vomit, thus making me cough and making my eyes teary. But as I looked up, there was something in the distance. I wiped the tears from my eyes. I saw them. Lanky humanoid figures, around 8 feet tall. They were standing in the middle of the road, in the distance. There were 4 of them as far as I can see. Their skin was white, and they looked like they were facing the opposite direction, away from me. They had these long and slender arms and legs, with frail-looking fingers. They weren't there before. They just appeared. But they sure as hell aren't human. And one by one, they started turning around. The skin on their face was removed, revealing the flesh underneath. It was a mix of pink and red. I let out a loud scream. My body was shaking. I couldn't move. Blood was dripping down from their faces, slowly dripping down their neck and onto their chest. Their eyes were bulged out, facing opposite directions before locking them at me. But the worst part was their mouth. When they saw me, they started smiling, a horrifying grin from ear to ear. Within this long, unsettling grin were humanoid-looking teeth with a yellowish tint to them. One of them motioned at me to come forward, using its long fingers. The others let out this loud childish giggle. They stood there motionless for a mere few seconds, before slowly walking towards me. Adrenaline kicked into my body. I started turning the car, but it took longer than usual, as the road wasn't that wide. My breath quickened. My heartbeat grew faster. I felt tears rolling down my eyes. They were only a few feet away from my car by the time I fully turned it around, startling me. One of them got a hold of the car, but I almost floored the pedal, getting out of there as fast as I can. I kept screaming the whole time. I was speechless. I could even hear them running after my car. At first I didn't even bother looking back, but something was telling me to do it. And so, as I looked in the rearview mirror, the last thing I saw was one of them raising a severed head by its hair, raising it proudly with that unsettling smile on their face, still facing me as they all disappeared into the darkness of the forest behind.